There comes a moment when you stop waiting for him to realize your value and you start living like he was never part of your story. And when you rise, when you heal, when you glow from a place he no longer has access to, that's when he feels the loss he never thought he would. There's a very specific kind of power that comes the moment you finally detach from someone who didn't value you. It's not the power of anger or revenge or proving anything. It's the quiet, steady strength of emotional clarity, the moment you realize you don't need to hold on anymore. This is all about that detachment, not the forced kind where you pretend you're fine but secretly fall apart at night. This is the genuine kind, the kind that comes from seeing the situation for what it truly was. You stop romanticizing his potential. You stop excusing his inconsistency. You stop convincing yourself that waiting for him to change is love. And slowly, your energy returns to you. When someone drains you without giving back, your mind becomes foggy with confusion and hope. You replay conversations trying to understand what you did wrong. You wonder if you should have tried harder, been more patient, been more understanding. You internalize his emotional absence as a reflection of your own worth. But detachment breaks that cycle. It clears the fog. You begin to understand that his behavior was never a measure of your value. It was a mirror of his capacity. And once that truth sinks in, the urge to hold on to him begins to fade, not because it doesn't hurt, but because the pain finally has direction. It's moving you forward instead of keeping you stuck. The moment you emotionally detach, your mind quiets. The overthinking fades, the panic decreases, the narrative shifts from "why wasn't I enough for him" to "why did I give so much to someone who gave so little?" That's where the power comes, from choosing yourself over someone who never chose you with intention. You stop responding the way you used to. You stop checking your phone for his messages. You stop wondering what he's doing or who he's talking to. And here's the irony. The moment you stop trying, he starts noticing. People feel energy before they understand behavior. When you were chasing his attention, overinvesting, or eagerly waiting for crumbs, he felt in control. He felt your availability. He felt your fear of losing him. But when you detach, that dynamic changes entirely. Your silence becomes powerful. Your absence becomes noticeable. Your emotional distance becomes the loudest message you've ever sent. And it wasn't intentional. You didn't do it to get a reaction. You did it because your self-respect finally outweighed your attachment. Detachment isn't about being cold or indifferent. It's about no longer allowing someone to treat you like an afterthought. It's about recognizing that loving someone shouldn't come at the cost of losing yourself. When you detach, you reclaim your time, your mental space, your emotional bandwidth. You start focusing on things that actually nourish you, your goals, your friends, your growth, your peace. And the more you pour into yourself, the more you rise back into the person you were before he dimmed your light. What breaks him isn't the fact that you moved on, it's the fact that you did it without theatrics, without begging, without warning. He expected you to always care. He expected you to always stay. He expected your heart to remain open even when he didn't deserve it. But detachment shuts that door not with anger, but with finality. You no longer react. You no longer chase. You no longer make him the center of your emotional world, and that's when the regret begins for him. Because nothing shakes a man more than losing access to a woman who once gave him so much of herself. Nothing forces reflection like watching her walk away with dignity, strength, and peace. Moving on is powerful. But detaching, moving on emotionally, mentally, and energetically, is transformative. It's the moment he stops feeling in control and starts feeling the loss. And it's the moment you stop breaking over him and start becoming the version of yourself he never believed you could become without him. Glowing from the inside is a transformation that begins long before anyone else notices it. It's not about changing your appearance, buying new clothes, or creating an image to make him regret losing you. True glow is internal, quiet at first, almost invisible, but powerful enough to rebuild every part of you that he once dimmed. This is about this inner shift. The moment you stop living in reaction to what he did and start living in alignment with who you're becoming. Because the truth is, when a woman glows from within, the world feels it long before she does. When you've been emotionally drained by someone who didn't appreciate you, it leaves you feeling small, dull, and unsure of yourself. You question if you were too much, too emotional, too demanding. But once you step out of that relationship or that attachment, you gradually realize that your shine didn't disappear. It was suppressed. Healing begins when you turn your attention inward and ask yourself what you need, not what he needs. You start reconnecting with your desires, your ambitions, your values, and your boundaries. You begin to fill the emotional gaps that he left with self-love instead of self-doubt. Glowing internally comes from rebuilding your peace. You create healthier routines. You start taking care of your body, your mind, and your environment. Maybe you sleep better. Maybe you move your body in ways that feel good. Maybe you declutter your space or spend more time in nature. These little things accumulate, forming a foundation of stability and calmness. And from that calmness emerges a confidence you haven't felt in a long time. You realize that you're not just healing from him, you're returning to yourself. As your inner world stabilizes, your outer world begins to reflect it. Your posture changes. You carry yourself with more presence. You smile differently, not because you're trying to impress anyone, but because you genuinely feel lighter. Your eyes look clearer, your voice sounds steadier, and even your silence feels softer yet stronger. People around you notice the shift, even if they can't explain it, and that includes him. The glow he sees isn't makeup or a new outfit. It's your peace, your clarity, your emotional independence. Another part of this inner glow comes from rediscovering your passions. When you love someone deeply, you often lose parts of yourself. You compromise your time, your goals, and sometimes your dreams. But after letting go, you begin to pick those pieces back up. You find joy in things you abandoned. You pursue interests you ignored. You invest in new opportunities, connections, and environments. That expansion of your life is magnetic, not just to potential partners, but to your future self. Internal glow also comes from boundaries. You learn to protect your energy. You say no without guilt. You stop tolerating inconsistency, mixed signals, or emotional negligence. You don't fight for people who won't fight for you, and nothing creates more inner glow than living in alignment with your standards. Your peace becomes non-negotiable, and that's when you truly shine. It's not hardness, it's self-respect wrapped in softness. What breaks him isn't the physical glow, it's the emotional one. It's seeing the woman he once knew now operating from a higher frequency, a place he can no longer reach. He remembers the version of you that gave too much and accepted too little, but he doesn't recognize the version of you who now owns her worth without needing his validation. That disconnect between who you were and who you're becoming is what pierces him the most. By the time he sees you glowing, it's already too late. Because the glow he's witnessing is the result of healing he didn't help you with. It's the result of strength you built on your own. And once you shine from within, no one, not even someone you once loved deeply, can dim it again. When you stop chasing closure, validation, or explanations from someone who didn't value you, you reclaim a kind of power that can't be negotiated or taken away. The desire for closure is often just the desire for reassurance that you mattered, that he really did care at some point, that you weren't foolish, naive, or unlovable. But when you depend on someone else to give you that reassurance, you hand them the keys to your emotional peace. You make your healing conditional on their honesty, their maturity, or their willingness to face the truth. And if he didn't give you the respect you deserved when you were together, what makes you think he'll suddenly give you clarity now? So, the moment you stop looking to him for closure is the moment you place the responsibility for healing back where it belongs within you. Closure is not something he gives you, it's something you decide. It's a line you draw, not a conversation you wait for. It's the recognition that his behavior already gave you all the clarity you need. He showed you who he was in his inconsistency, his excuses, his emotional detachment, or his lack of effort. That asterisk was asterisk the closure. The problem is that we often want the story to end differently. We want him to say something that validates our pain. We want him to acknowledge what he lost. But what if that desire is what's keeping you stuck? Because the more you wait for someone who couldn't show up for you in the relationship, the longer you postpone the life you could be building without him. When you stop looking to him for closure, you stop replaying the past as if it still needs a different ending. You shift your focus from "why did he do this?" to "what does this teach me about who I am and what I deserve?" That shift is monumental. It changes how you see the breakup, but more importantly, it changes how you see yourself. Instead of seeing yourself as someone who was abandoned or overlooked, you start seeing yourself as someone who is now free to choose better, love deeper, and create a life that aligns with your worth. This is where real healing begins. It's not about numbing your emotions or pretending you don't care. It's about acknowledging the pain, understanding the lesson, and then deciding that the chapter is over without needing his signature at the bottom of the page. It's about reclaiming ownership of your story. Healing becomes a choice, not a reaction, a direction, not a negotiation. And when you make that choice, you stop repeating emotional patterns that keep you tied to someone who has already moved on. And the beautiful thing is this: once you stop needing closure from him, you start showing up differently in your own life. You become more grounded, more self-assured, more connected to your values. You stop settling for half love and half effort. You stop bending your boundaries just to keep someone. You stop justifying behavior that contradicts the future you want. You start living like someone who deserves consistency, reciprocity, and respect, because you do. And here's the ironic part: the moment you stop needing anything from him is often the moment he starts feeling the loss. Not because you're trying to make him regret it, but because your energy shifts. You're no longer orbiting around his validation. You're no longer accessible at the emotional level he once took for granted. You're moving forward, growing, glowing, rebuilding, and becoming someone who is harder to access, harder to forget, and impossible to replace. That's the kind of closure he never expected, and the kind he can't do anything about. There comes a moment in your healing when you stop waiting for him to recognize your value and start recognizing it yourself. And that moment is powerful because it shifts your entire emotional orbit. When you detach from his perception of you, you stop living in reaction to what he gave, what he withheld, or what he failed to see. You step out of the role of someone seeking approval and step into the role of someone reclaiming her own identity. Detachment isn't numbness. It's not pretending you never cared. It's the conscious choice to stop tying your worth to someone who couldn't meet you where you were. It's the moment you decide, I can miss you and still move forward. I can hurt and still choose myself. I can love and still let go. The truth is, when you're deeply attached to someone who didn't value you, you start seeing yourself through their limitations. If he didn't choose you, you start believing you're not worth choosing. If he didn't appreciate you, you start believing you weren't enough to appreciate. If he didn't prioritize you, you start believing you were easy to replace. But those beliefs aren't reflections of who you are. They are reflections of who he was, what he lacked, and the emotional capacity he didn't have. Detaching from him means detaching from the false narrative that his behavior created. It means stepping back and recognizing that his inability to show up was never about your value. It was about his readiness, his maturity, his insecurities, or his emotional inconsistencies. When you detach, you start seeing the relationship from a place of clarity instead of longing. You stop romanticizing the handful of beautiful moments and start recognizing the pattern of painful ones. You stop chasing potential and start acknowledging reality. You stop thinking about what you could have done differently and start seeing what you actually deserve. And as you detach, something else happens. You rediscover parts of yourself that were neglected while you were busy trying to hold him, fix him, understand him, or convince him. Your energy begins returning to you, your intuition gets louder, your standards rise without effort. You naturally step back into the version of you that was never dependent on someone else's validation to feel whole. Detachment is also the birthplace of emotional freedom. Because once you stop giving him emotional access to you, your thoughts, your worries, your hopes, your expectations, you stop living under the shadow of what he does or doesn't do. You no longer check your phone hoping for a message. You no longer measure your day by whether he gives you attention. You no longer question your worth based on how he behaves. Instead, you become centered within yourself. You become someone whose peace is no longer at the mercy of someone else's inconsistency. That's when you start glowing in a way that's effortless, because nothing dims your light the way emotional dependence does, and nothing brightens it the way emotional independence does. And here's the part he never expected. When you detach, he feels it. He might not say it, he might not show it, but he notices the shift. He notices that your energy is no longer wrapped around him. He notices that your absence feels heavier than your presence ever did. He notices that you're no longer affected by his attention or lack of it. Because your glow isn't something you manufacture, it's something that returns when you remove the emotional weight he placed on you. And that glow, that quiet confidence, that self-possession, that's what breaks him. Not because you're trying to hurt him, but because he realizes too late that the version of you he took for granted is now gone, unreachable, and no longer waiting for him to see her worth. Letting go of the hope that he'll come back is one of the most difficult but liberating decisions you'll ever make, because it forces you to confront a truth you've been avoiding. The future you were holding onto existed only in your imagination, not in his intentions. We often stay emotionally stuck because we're clinging to a maybe. Maybe he'll wake up one day and realize what he lost. Maybe he'll fix himself. Maybe he'll finally choose you the way you chose him. But those maybes keep your heart suspended in a place where nothing moves, where you're waiting instead of living, hoping instead of healing, and holding a door open for someone who's already walked out. The moment you release the fantasy of his return is the moment you reclaim your future. Because that future was never meant to be held hostage by someone who didn't have the clarity or courage to stand beside you. The truth is, hope becomes harmful when it replaces reality, and the reality is simple. If someone wanted to be in your life, they would be. People don't forget the person they truly value. They don't get confused about someone who feels like home. They don't stay silent when they're afraid to lose you. When a man knows your worth, he protects access to you. When he doesn't, you find yourself trying to protect the relationship alone. Letting go of the hope that he'll come back is not giving up. It's giving yourself back the power you handed over while waiting for him to grow into a version of himself he may never become. It's recognizing that you deserve someone who chooses you without hesitation, not someone who might choose you someday under the right conditions. What people forget is that holding onto false hope doesn't keep the connection alive. It keeps the pain alive. It keeps your mind replaying old conversations, your heart clinging to old feelings, and your life orbiting someone who is no longer participating in your story. You start turning down better opportunities, both in love and life, because part of you is still emotionally reserved for him. You hold back your own growth because you're afraid that if you move too far forward, he won't be able to find his way back. But what if the very thing you fear is the thing you need most? What if moving too far forward is exactly how you heal, and how you discover a version of yourself so fulfilled that the idea of going backward no longer appeals to you? Letting go of hope also creates emotional space for new possibilities. When you stop checking your phone, stop replaying memories, stop imagining reconciliations, your heart finally gets room to breathe, room to rediscover joy, room to rebuild confidence, room to attract someone who knows your worth without needing to lose you first. Because the universe doesn't reward people who cling to what's gone, it rewards those who trust that something better will replace what they released. Your glow doesn't return because he comes back. It returns because you stop waiting for him to. And the irony is, when you finally let go, that's usually when he feels the loss the most. Not because he's ready to love you the way you deserve, but because he can sense you pulling away from the version of yourself that needed him. He can feel the shift, the absence, the silence, but by then you're not interested in old chapters, you're writing new ones. Letting go of the hope that he'll come back is how you free yourself, how you rise, and how you step into a future where your glow isn't dimmed by waiting for someone who wasn't ready for the light you carried. There is a very real transformation that happens when you start choosing your own life again. It's subtle at first, almost invisible even to you, but then, day by day, your energy shifts. You start waking up with more clarity, more peace, more direction. You begin focusing on the things that nourish you instead of the things that drained you. And the more you invest in your own growth, the less space his memory occupies in your mind. What once felt like a wound begins to feel like wisdom. What once felt like abandonment begins to feel like a redirection. And what once felt like heartbreak becomes the very fuel that ignites your evolution into someone more confident, more grounded, and more aligned with her true worth. There's something powerful about reclaiming your life after giving so much of it to someone who didn't appreciate it. You start realizing how many dreams you paused because you were waiting for him to decide what he wanted. You see how much emotional energy you poured into trying to understand him, fix him, or interpret him. And now, instead of pouring that energy outward, you pour it back into yourself. You start prioritizing your goals, your passions, your healing, your joy. You surround yourself with people who uplift you instead of leaving you in emotional limbo. Your world becomes fuller not because he's in it, but because you finally stopped making him the center of it. As you grow, something else happens. Your standards change without effort. You're no longer attracted to inconsistency, emotional crumbs, or half-hearted love. You're no longer impressed by excuses or confused by mixed signals. Instead, you look for alignment, reciprocity, emotional maturity, genuine effort. The things you used to tolerate now feel suffocating. The behaviors you once justified now feel completely unacceptable. This is the beauty of self-growth. You don't have to force yourself to move on. You simply evolve past the version of yourself that wanted him. You outgrow the relationship the same way you outgrow old beliefs, old insecurities, and old versions of your identity. And while you're rising, he's watching from a distance, not always physically, but emotionally. He can feel the shift. He can sense that the access he once took for granted is no longer available. The version of you who overextended, overgave, and overlooked his shortcomings doesn't exist anymore. You've stepped into a version of yourself he never got to experience, the version that knows her value without needing someone else to validate it. And ironically, that's usually when regret hits him the hardest. Not because he suddenly became the man you needed, but because he realizes he lost someone rare while he was still figuring out his own confusion. Your growth becomes a mirror he's forced to look into. While you're evolving, he's confronted with the choices he made. While you're glowing, he's burdened with the awareness of what he let go. While you're expanding, he's shrinking inside the space where he once had influence over your heart. But here's the part that matters most. Your glow isn't meant to punish him, it's meant to free you. It's meant to show you that your life was never meant to revolve around a person who couldn't see your worth. It's meant to remind you that your story continues beautifully, even without the people you once thought you couldn't live without. Your growth is your closure, your joy is your turning point, your self-respect is your healing. And the life you build after him becomes the proof that moving on wasn't just the right choice. It was the beginning of everything you were truly meant for. In the end, moving on like he never existed isn't about pretending the past didn't hurt. It's about proving it no longer controls you. You rise, you heal, you glow, not to show him what he lost, but to remind yourself of what you gained. And by the time he finally feels the weight of his regret, you'll already be standing in a life that feels brighter, fuller, and beautifully out of his reach.